So coming up this weekend from the UFC, we have UFC Fight Night Delice versus Imavov, but directly after that we have the Road to UFC Finals, where we're going to be seeing the finals of a tournament that has been taking place over the last few months on different cards in China, I believe is where they hosted most of the quarterfinals and semifinals, but now the finals are going to be in the UFC APEX directly after Delice versus Imavov. So Delice versus Imavov starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This card is going to start at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it should be pretty good. There was meant to be 4 fights for the 4 weight classes that the tournament did have, but unfortunately we've lost the bantamweight fight, so now we've just got the flyweight, featherweight, and lightweight final. Only 3 fights. What happens in these fights is the winner is guaranteed a pretty lengthy contract with the UFC, and sometimes the loser can get signed as well. So it could be worth watching just to kind of see some guys that will be in the UFC in the future, maybe win or lose. To kick off the card, we've got the flyweight final, Rei Tsuruya taking on Jiniushiyue, and I am going to be picking Rei Tsuruya in this one here. Rei Tsuruya is a grappler, and that's kind of it, to be honest with you. His striking is okay, but it's not great, and his wrestling's pretty good, but although he does have a really good wrestling background, I believe he was like a top wrestler in Japan in high school, he doesn't really come across as like a fantastic MMA wrestler like someone like Shin Haraguchi does, but I'll get talking about him in a second. He's taken on Jiniushiyue, who I think probably will be the better striker in this matchup. Jiniushiyue is a bit of a grappler himself, but he's probably going to want to avoid the grappling of Tsuruya here. He did win his last fight over Seongguk Choi, and Seongguk Choi is a really good striker, a prospect of the Korean Zombie actually, and he made it to the finals of it must have been the 2022 season number 1 of Road to UFC. This is season number 2. Jiniushiyue beats him to get in the finals against Tsuruya. I think if Tsuruya can get this fight down to the ground early, and he's not tired, I think he can submit Jiniushiyue, and maybe do it in round number 1. The thing is, though, that we have seen from Tsuruya, and Mark Climaco was able to expose this, is Tsuruya, he's so go forward, all action, non-stop pace with the wrestling and the takedowns. That's going to slow you down a lot. And Mark Climaco was able to defend a lot of takedowns. He was able to make Tsuruya work in that fight. And Tsuruya showed a lot of signs and fatigue in round number 2 and round number 3. But he managed to just really push through it. And he did manage to win the fight against Mark Climaco just by kind of being aggressive. Got a takedown towards the end of the rounds and just kind of stole the fight from Mark Climaco, who was looking pretty good himself. But when Tsuruya does get the fight down to the ground, his grappling is elite. He just needs to get it down there. I think he can get it down there against Jiniushiyue. If he's stuck on the feet with Jiniushiyue, I think he's going to be in trouble, as Jiniushiyue is a pretty high volume guy. I mean, he out-volumed Seongguk Choi, who I wouldn't say is a high volume guy, but he's a powerful striker. Before that, he just dominated Billy Pasalatan with his wrestling and grappling, ground and pounded him out pretty easily. This is a hard matchup for him, though. Rei Tsuruya is a legitimate prospect, only 21 years old. I would compare him to Tatsuro Taira, very similar in style. Maybe Tsuruya is a bit more green than Taira, because Taira is a top 15 flyweight right now. But Tsuruya could be that next guy for the UFC from Japan in the flyweight division. I'm going to pick Tsuruya. I'm picking Tsuruya by submission in this fight. And now we move on to Kaiwen taking on Yizha. This is a fight which I'm going to put a massive asterisk on here, because these two are actually training partners and friends. But because it's a tournament, of course they're going to have to fight against each other eventually if they do keep winning. And that's what we've got. So Kaiwen Lee and Yizha, they're friends and training partners. So don't put any money on this fight. Just sit back and hopefully enjoy it, because they both have agreed to put on a fight so good that they're both going to get signed to the promotion. I do hope that is what they're going to do, because Kaiwen Lee, my goodness, this guy can be in some really good fights, but he showed me in his last fight he can be in some really bad ones, man. In his last fight, he was super low volume, didn't really do anything against Koya Kanda except just defend a lot of takedowns and throw strikes when he needed to. It was a terrible fight. He did say that the reason why it was such a bad fight was just he didn't want to take any risks, so he wanted to be in the final so bad. And now he's taking on Yizha, who's coming off a good performance himself. He beat Sang Won Kim by mixing up the wrestling, the grappling with his striking. Before that, he did beat Wujiabeki Jiahefu, who took him on short notice, took him down pretty easily, but then Yizha just submitted him with an armbar. Just like that, showed off his lights-out grappling, which he does have. Yizha is more of a grappler. He's going to have to try and get the fight down to the ground, though, if he wants to grapple against Kaiwen Lee, which could be easier said than done. Kaiwen is a former national wrestling champion in China, and on the feet, he's a dangerous man. Like, he fought for one championship for a bit, got some crazy knockouts there, got an insane knockout against Liu Kai in his last fight as well. This guy is, in my opinion, the real deal, and he was my pick to win the whole thing before the event even started. Coming off a loss with a 10-5 record, I sat here in this chair, not in this room because I was living at a different place, but I sat in this chair and I told you guys that Kaiwen Lee is my pick to win the entire tournament, and a lot of people didn't like that, you know. 10-5 record coming off a loss. Records up for DJs, mate, trust me. Lee Kaiwen is a legitimate fighter. Yizha is a bit of a nightmare matchup, though. And the fact that Kaiwen did show that he's happy to be low volume did scare me. But when Lee Kaiwen is moving forward, when he's fighting his fight, when he's got you in a brawl, there's not many featherweights out there that are more powerful than him. And there's not many more featherweights that are going to be able to deal with that striking that he does possess when he wants to go forward. If these two are going to go there and put on a war, put on a brawl so that they can both get signed to the UFC, I think Lee Kaiwen comes out on top because I do think he's got more power and I think he's going to be the one getting the knockout. It's also worth noting, he is massive for this weight class. I believe he used to fight at 155 for one. Now he's fighting for 145 for the UFC, for Rei UFC. Huge for the weight class, very well built, a lot of power, a scary man, probably for other reasons as well as MMA. Let's move on to Rongzhu. Taking on Shin Haraguchi in the main event. The lightweight fight, the final fight of the event. It's gonna be a good one, I think, I hope. Shin Haraguchi's fights normally aren't that great just because he's an incredibly good wrestler, and his wrestling is so good, his opponents just can't stop him, so he just ends up wrestling them and ending up on top position and just kind of controlling from there. He doesn't have the most finishing ability. I know if you go to his event, to his fight profile, you'll see a lot of finishes, man, because he was dominating people in before he did come into Rei UFC. Dominated Windry Patilima, who was a pretty decent prospect from Indonesia, actually. Jaehyun Park took him on short notice. Not the best performance from Haraguchi there. But one thing I will say about Shin Haraguchi is he's a really, really good wrestler. He's got a national title and I believe international titles in freestyle wrestling as well. I don't know if he was a world champion freestyle wrestler, but I do know he won like the Asian championships in freestyle wrestling, which is pretty good, and you can tell because his wrestling is really, really good, man. And once he gets it going, there's not many people that can stop him. Rongzhu might be able to, though, because Rongzhu has been in the UFC before. He had a pretty bad performance in his debut where he just looked at Rodrigo Vargas and lost a decision when he really could have and easily could have won that fight. And then he missed weight a couple of times, and I think the UFC were like, you know what? You can't make weight. You're 1-2. And at the end of the day, he was just signed to the promotion way too early. Like, you could just see the inexperience. I know. He had 23 pro fights before he got into the UFC. But you could tell that he was still inexperienced in a way. Like, he was making mistakes. He wasn't doing a lot in his fights. This sounds so weird to say that a fighter with 23 fights just looked like he was inexperienced. But trust me, that genuinely did look like it was. But he looks like he got cut from the promotion. And now he just looks so much better. He looked improved against Felipe Maia. It was only a 2.5 minute fight, but he already looked like he had made more and more improvements against Sung Chang Hong. And he looked good against Sang-Ok Kim as well. It looks like Rongzhu is a much more patient fighter now, which is good, because he could get a bit wild in the past. It looks like his technique's a bit better. It even looks like he's improved his takedown defense, which is not a good thing for Shin Haraguchi. And one thing as well that I forgot to bring up as well. Shin Haraguchi is tiny for this weight class. Tiny. He's in this tournament here at 155 pounds. I could tell you right now, he could easily make 145. And he could make bantamweight. He is so small. I actually genuinely am almost convinced that he could be a bantamweight in the UFC. He is so small for 155. There's absolutely no way this guy cuts weight. He needs to get a nutritionist or something. So if he does get signed to the promotion, he can make 145 safely. Because that's his weight class. This isn't his weight class. I do think, though, that Shin Haraguchi's wrestling is going to be good enough to stop Rongzhu. But as long as the fight's on the feet, Rongzhu is going to be very live for a knockout. But Shin Haraguchi times his takedown so well. He controls you so well. He ties up the legs so well. I just think once Shin Haraguchi gets a hold of Rongzhu, he just won't be able to get back up. So that's the pick. I'm picking Shin Haraguchi. I'm not confident in it. I'm not confident in my Kaiwen pick. I don't think there's odds out for this event, but I'm pretty confident there'll be underdog picks. Haraguchi and Kaiwen. But Tsuruya is probably a pretty big favorite. Yeah, he is. So they're my picks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Will you be staying up to watch this event? I think for me, it's going to be on at like 6 p.m. So it's pretty good for me. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.